I want to talk about something cool about the 2000 Cobra R, and that's something very special about it that's involved in the documentation of the car. Something that came with every 2000 Cobra R that you should get is the black binder. Now, the black binder looks like just a normal binder with the Cobra R logo on it, but this is very important because it has some really neat information in it, and it should have a metal plaque inside that's called a dash plaque that should have the build number on it, and it's the only one ever made for the car. And there's even a little technical card here that says congratulations on the purchase of your 2000 SVT Cobra R. Because your R is an exclusive limited edition high performance vehicle, SVT has created a very special Cobra R owner's book for you. And so these are the things that should be inside this binder. It says it will include the certificate of authenticity for your vehicle with the VIN number and build number, the performance documentations, special vehicle engineering information, photographs of the engine and vehicle building process, press release and Cobra R history information. SVT will also create for you an engraved SVT R badge with your Cobra R's unique VIN number and build number. And then it says that the books will not be completed and shipped until a few months after production ends. And the books will be mailed to the address indicated on the vehicle's registration. If you'd like to have the book mailed to a different address, there's a number to call, and on behalf of the SVT team, they'd like to thank you for choosing a 2000 Cobra R. So if you have any questions or concerns, don't hesitate to contact them personally at that number. So pretty cool to see all of that. And so here you have the owner's manual on the left in the plastic, and it's very good if this comes with the car because those are one-off as well, and people have paid $1,000 for one of those if they can find them. And so here's an example of what the dash plaque would look like. So it has the Cobra R logo on the left, Ford in the middle, SVT, and then above it the VIN number and the build number of 300. So kind of hard to see. These are hard to find pictures of on the internet as it is. Here's kind of a blurry one, but you get the idea. Pretty cool to see. Here's kind of a group of documentation that you might find with a Cobra R. And here's the black binder. You can see the flaps are kind of torn up a little bit. That's very normal. I've seen them like that. I've seen them torn up even worse. There's a lot of things inside this binder that are kind of fun to look at. There's this sheet here that says, it's like a welcome letter. Dear 2000 Cobra R owner, congratulations on your decision to acquire a 2000 SVT Cobra R. Welcome to the SVT family. We trust that your Cobra R will provide you with many years of enjoyment and create many wonderful memories. And it goes on to continue talking about the Cobra R and how the team has been dedicated to enthusiasts, and they launched the SVT name. Actually, it says in 1991 they started SVT, staffing it with a core group of dedicated enthusiasts, and the mission is simple but very ambitious. It's to create a line of high performance vehicles that satisfy the most demanding driving enthusiasts, and to back those products up with a group of Ford dealers who understand the special requirements of performance to the customers. And so it goes through 9 years. SVT has grown to become comprehensive high performance vehicle development and marketing organization, and goes on and on about that kind of stuff. It's pretty cool to see. But it says it's more than just great cars and trucks, but it's really about philosophy, and pretty cool letter. It's fun to read through all that stuff. It talks about performance, substance, exclusivity, and then it's just kind of fun to look through the binder and see the other stuff that's in there. Now, I'm not sure if this came with any of the binders or any of the cars, but I did come across this and thought it was pretty cool. It says printable photos 2000 Cobra R Ford Media CD. So that's really neat to see. I'm not sure if that came with the cars, like I just said, but it's pretty cool to include it in case somebody knows about these. Now, there was like a dyno sheet that shows the engine and torque, and there's a bar graph that shows the braking comparison, and the green is actually the 95 Cobra R. The blue would be the 99 Cobra, just a 2001 Cobra, and the red is the 2000 Cobra R. And there's a bushing comparison, and it just shows the SVT Mustang Cobra in blue and then the red would be the SVT Cobra R. They do have a certificate for the Cobra R, and it has the VIN number. It shows it's a limited edition 2000 Mustang Cobra R, assembled at the Dearborn Assembly Plant on March 14th, 2000, and it's vehicle number 22 of 300. Now this certificate is actually a reproduction. It says Ford Performance Group on the bottom left. It should just say SVT and have the signatures back then of the people who were involved with it. So unfortunately, this is a reproduction certificate, and the original would be somewhere else. But this is an example of what the certificate would look like and have the numbers of the car on there. So pretty cool to have a certificate like that. And it can be inside the binder like this in a clear protector sheet. And now this here is the 2000 SVT Cobra R technical data sheet, and it talks about the configuration of the engine, that it's a longitudinally mounted 90-degree V8. It's a cast iron block with aluminum heads, forged steel crankshaft, and billet steel connecting rods, forged aluminum pistons, McLeod aluminum flywheel. So right there, that's pretty cool, because a lot of people think that the Terminators were the first, fully forged engines, but according to this, the forged crankshaft, and it has billet connecting rods, which are pretty strong, and forged pistons. So that's neat to know that that was all made pre-runner to the Terminator Cobra. And talks about the bore and stroke, displacements 5.4, compression ratios 9:6. So that's like pretty low compression actually. New Coyote engines are like 11 or 12, and the Mach 1 was 10. So it's pretty cool to see that it wasn't like super high compression, and it still made 385 horse rated, which was underrated. And talks about the red line, talks about the dual overhead cams and the secondary chains and all of that, roller finger followers, hydraulic lash adjusters. So basically a 4-valve engine there. It does say it has beehive shaped valve springs, which I think is kind of interesting. And of course 4 valves per cylinder. And then of course talks about intake valves, exhaust, ignition, sequential fuel injection. So basically just going through there. Mass air sensors 80 millimeters. Air filter says it's a K&N, so that's pretty cool. Like we talked about, this car has a lot of aftermarket part companies that came together to work with Ford with this, so that's pretty cool. The exhaust manifolds, stainless steel short tube headers, and those did look aftermarket when we were looking underneath the car. They looked special for the car. Exhaust system, the Bassani X pipe, which we saw and talked about, and it says 98 Cobra catalysts, Borla mufflers, and side exit exhaust. So that's interesting. It would say 98 Cobra cat system, and the Borla mufflers we talked about and saw. That's pretty cool. Now it does talk about the transmission and the T56, and it is different than the T56 that would be in the 03-04 Cobra. And a lot of that has to do with the gear ratios. This one has the first gears at 297, and the 03-04 Cobra has a 266 first gear. And the difference there is a 297 is a taller, longer gear, and it's better for road racing, which is what the Cobra R is more about. And so it's pretty cool that you can see that. Now when you go to buy a T56 Magnum, you usually have the choice between a 297 or a 266 first gear. So pretty cool to see that, and just everybody who's talked about over the years buying a T56 out of a wrecked Cobra R said that it had the 297 first gear, and it was something that they would disclose to tell people that it's not really the same as the 03 Cobra with the 266 first gear. So I've seen that before in listings on Craigslist, and maybe I was just lucky to see an actual Cobra R T56 on Craigslist before. But it does talk about the 4-inch aluminum drive shaft, and the rear axle being the 8.8 ring gear. Like I had mentioned, I was pretty sure it was a 355, and it is. And so it's a 355 gear, which later the Mach 1s and Terminators would all come with. Earlier, the Cobras had 327 gears, so it's pretty cool to see a 355 axle. I think that's a really good gear. and it talks about the half shafts GKN. It says they're hardened with 31 spline teeth, so that's pretty cool. I was wondering if they were 31 spline axle shafts, because I know the earlier Cobras weren't, and then the Terminators were, and so it looks like the Cobra R had 31 spline axles. And so it's also talking here about the modified McPherson strut with gas-charged monotube Bilstein struts, and they're 800 pounds per inch. Eyebox springs, we talked about that with the red springs, lowering springs basically, but good for road racing. And the 28 millimeter tubular stabilizer bar, the high durometer lower control arm bushings, and in the rear it has a dual A-arm independent gas charged Bilstein monotube shock absorber as well, 750 pound. The Ibach coil springs, 26 millimeter stabilizer bar, and the high durometer bushings on the suspension mounts. Now I thought it was cool they had pictures of them building these Cobra R engines and other parts of the assembly, and this says that the engine build process took about 4 months and was done at the Ford prototype engine manufacturing facility. And in this photo the engine fixture is upside down as a technician whose name is Mark Smith installs the Canton Racing oil pan. So you can see that oil pan there is an aftermarket one. I believe it's higher capacity as well. Those are very popular in the Mustang world, and so it's pretty cool to see that they went to the point to go ahead and put one of those on the car. Here it shows the unibody going down the assembly line, and it just says that the floor pan is being welded at Dearborn Assembly Plant, and the SVT Cobra R build utilizes the same welding lines as the SVT Cobra, so I'd imagine that's the same as the Mustang itself, the whole unibody. But then as it continues, it shows it in these other parts where it says after the bodies were welded together, unique holes were drilled for the oil cooler brackets, power steering, heater box, overflow bottle, and air filter assembly. And the body was then primed, sealed, and sent to the paint shop. And then it shows the engines on crates, and it said that the 5.4 engines would come on a crate that had 3 to a pallet. So I thought that was kind of cool, and it looks like the top Cobra R logo isn't on there yet. And now it shows the bodies of the car all painted and ready to go, and it says that the photo shows the Cobra R bodies after they've been painted, and the sound control materials were not installed in order to reduce weight. So that's like sound deadening. And I had actually seen someone recently who's making a nice Cobra R replica, and he's going through and even removing all of the sound deadening material in his Mustang that he's turning into a Cobra R replica, just to make it like this and make it as correct as he can. And so that's pretty cool. And it says the painted bodies proceeded directly to the trim line. When the bodies got to the instrument panel installation area, the powertrain assembly began. And then there's a picture of all the engines going down the line, and it says that the engines were hung on a transfer line to begin the powertrain build process. The 6-speed transmission was mated to the engine, and then the engine mounts, CAT systems, wiring were installed. After the engine system was complete, it met up with the body coming out of the instrument panel installation area. And then when it shows the drivetrain actually going into the car, that's pretty interesting, because it says that the biggest challenge of the build process was the engine installation, and that SVE and the plant had to determine how to deck the 5.4 engine with standard production cycle times. It was necessary to change the install angle, fixtures, and the decking sled. So basically what it took to get the engine to go up into the car had to be tweaked to make that all happen. And what we talked about with the wheels going on the car earlier, you can see this is the conveyor, where the conveyor belt feeds the wheels down, and it sets it down in order of what car is going down the line and what needed what wheel next, if it was a GT or a V6. But it said the Cobra R wheels were too big to fit on that conveyor, and they'd probably get stuck, because that conveyor had probably only seen 17-inch wheels as the biggest wheels ever. going down there at the time. And so they had to bring the Cobra R wheels in, and that had to go through the whole process of making sure that the next wheels coming down the belt went onto the next car, and the Cobra R would be in that lineup somewhere because it was produced with the other cars at Dearborn. And so it was part of the whole process. I'm sure that there were headaches involved, and they had to do a lot of things to make these cars happen. It wasn't just like, oh, hey, let's build the Cobra R. Okay, well, we'll just put a couple of big engines in them and send them off. It's like, no, there's a lot involved in, from the wheels to the way the engine goes in to the independent rear suspension to all of the stuff involved. There's a lot that they had to do to make this car happen. Now, putting the independent rear suspension into the back of the Cobra was the same process as the 99 and later the 01 Cobra and the 0304 Cobra with the independent rear suspension. So that process was already down. It just talks about how it had some higher aftermarket pieces or higher end pieces and bushings in that independent rear suspension. And so here's the seats ready to go into the car. I think that's pretty cool. You have to realize 300 cars, that's 600 seats because there's 2 seats that go in the Cobra R. Of course, no rear seat, and I'm sure that was part of the production process as well. But here's the Recaro seats getting ready to go into the car, and so just part of the whole process of getting those lined up and staged and ready to go in the car. And here's a cool picture of the Cobra R coming off the assembly line, but you'll notice it doesn't have a hood on it, it doesn't have the front splitter on it, and it's basically saying that when it comes off the line, the cars were then shipped to a second location for the installation of the hood, the wing, the spoiler, and the front splitter, which was usually delivered in the trunk. So they would take the front splitters and put them inside the car. And there are some pretty cool videos. Rev and Evan, one of the cool guys from Muscle Mustang and Fast Forward magazines in the past, who did lots of reviews on these cars, and he test drove these cars. He was an editor for the magazines, and he's gone to some pretty cool collections, and one of them has a Cobra R still on the plastic, and it has the splitter inside the car just the way it was shipped. So that's pretty cool. And Enthusiast Garage, another really great channel, and I love watching him. He had a Cobra R. He had a really great, highly documented Cobra R, and he had talked about how the bolts on the fenders were sometimes loosened, which chipped some of the paint off of the fender bolts in the engine bay because the hood wasn't on the car when it went down the line. It was put on later, and sometimes they'd have to loosen those bolts and move them around to make sure the hood would clear the fenders. And so that was part of all this, and that's pretty cool to see the car like this. And I've learned things from those other great people who have great YouTube channels and who are great enthusiasts as well. And I really enjoy watching their stuff and learning from them, and I've learned a lot from them as well. And so that's pretty cool to see a Cobra coming off the assembly line like that, and then it was going to go somewhere else. And like we talked about, the hoods had defects, and there was someone, I think, who didn't like that the hood had some bubbles on it, and so they would ask for another hood. I believe it was Enthusiast's Garage YouTube channel who had the Cobra R and said that the Cobra R he had bought turned out didn't have the original hood on his car because the person had noticed the bubbling in the paint on the hood, and so he went back and had them take one of the hoods off of a Cobra R that hadn't been put on the car yet because they were all in racks where the second location was, and they just traded him hoods and put a different hood on the car that was in better shape. But it's very common for those hoods to have bubbling or defects in them, so that's really not a problem. But anyway, just lots of cool stories like that. There's a picture of a Cobra R at the Dearborn Assembly Plant showroom that's in the binder. There's a sheet in here about the 2000 SVT Mustang Cobra R prototype unveiled, and it talks about North Carolina, I think, and when the Mustang Cobra was taken to Charlotte Motor Speedway during the Mustang Club of America's 35th anniversary celebration. And Tom Scarpello, who was a big SVT guy back then, he was showing the car off, and it says that it was grabber orange, a grabber orange Cobra R. I don't know if that's performance red or if they just called it that or if the prototype was that color or whatever, but I thought that was very interesting. It said that, and it just talked about the Cobra R and all the different neat things about it, the wheels, tires, you know, all the racing stuff that they had going on for the car, and that there would be 300 R models made, and that the Cobra R debuted in '93, and that they also had the '95 and the Cobra R. So these are all the Cobra R's it talked about, and you know, the Windsor engine and the 5-speed, and the older one with the 17x9 wheels, and now we have the newer Mustang that's going to have all of that and more. So the Cobra R really built off the heritage of the other two previous Cobra R's. They had another picture of a Cobra R and with the 00 on it that looked pretty cool. And then they just talked about how it sets a performance benchmark, and that this was an iconic car taken and developed specifically for racing, and 300 will be built at the Dearborn assembly plant in March of 2000. So that's pretty cool because those build numbers reflect that, the build production numbers and dates. And it says that this is the fastest and best handling Mustang ever, and it will set a performance benchmark for the competition. And that's John Coletti, famous for the Terminator, but he was working on these Cobra R's and stuff even back then, and so pretty cool to see all of that and just look through all this really cool documentation. And one of my favorite things was this sheet in the back. So if you stayed around for this, then this is probably one of my favorite parts, and it just shows that the 2000 SVT Cobra R partners in performance, and it has the contact list of all these manufacturers that worked with Ford to do this. And it talks about the rear brake pads by AKE Bono Akebono, if I said that right. Bassani had the X-Pipe, and it says to contact for off-road and high-flow cats if you want to do that with your car. B&M for the shifter, the Ripper shifter. I actually have a B&M Ripper shifter that came with one of my Cobras. The BF Goodrich, the custom 265/40 ZR18 tires. Bilstein, I can never decide how to say that, but those are the gas charge front and rear shocks. The Borla Performance Industries for the mufflers and side exit exhaust. Brembo for the aluminum 4-piston front brake calipers and front rotors. Canton Racing Products, the oil pan we saw in the windage tray, which would be inside the oil pan. The iBox springs, we talked about those red racing springs, the suspension. Fuel safe systems for the 20-gallon bladder type fuel cell, the fuel tank in the back of the car. K&N for the cylindrical air filter. McLeod for the aluminum flywheel. And Multimatic, and they made the carbon fiber front brake heat shields. So when I was looking at those spindles, I said, that looks like something's a little different. I guess that's what it was. I thought I did see some carbon fiber in there, and it really was. It was the shields for the brakes over there by the spindles. And then, of course, Recaro for the seats, and Tremec for the T56 6-speed transmission. And so that's pretty cool to see that all these companies partnering to make one really awesome race car for the year 2000. So that's just a little bit of going into the black binder of the 2000 Cobra R. That's not everything that's inside, and it's not close-up details of everything, but it's kind of fun to look inside one of these and see what there is. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Stay tuned for more Mustang content.